Sky News Australia. Fox News tribute act with delusions of grandeur. A 24-hour panic attack with a broadcast license. A place where every progressive policy means the end of Western civilization, and everything is always the fault of the woke left.
Woke left.
Woke left.
Woke left. Woke left and the politically correct.
The loony left.
Woke activists and inner city elites.
The inner city elites.
Woke elites.
Self-righteous, smug, pampered left-wing ideologues.
If you were to turn on your Foxtel box during the day or free-to-air television in regional Australia and flip over to Sky News, you'd find a fairly standard news channel doing fairly ordinary reporting on the day's events. Sure, it might have a right-leaning slant, because most news does have some sort of bias, but for the most part, it's a conventional broadcast news service. But tune in from 5 to 11 p.m. and you'd be tuning into a very different type of television. Sky News After Dark, the network's flagship lineup of political commentary, opinion, and the most exhausting takes on Australian television. This is where the lines begin to blur between news, propaganda, and literal straight-up conspiracy. Between monologues and diatribes, panel shows, and endless culture war debates, this is where Sky News' biggest personalities like Andrew Bolt, Peter Credlin, and Paul Murray hit their stride. Okay, this is a serious question. Do you actually know anyone who watches Sky After Dark on television? Actually, statistically, it's pretty unlikely. According to the most recent numbers I could find, on a specific Tuesday night in 2020, After Dark's flagship programs were attracting only around 50,000 to 70,000 viewers. Paul Murray had around 70,000, Alan Jones around 63,000, who, by the way, is no longer at the network after not getting his contract renewed. But don't feel too bad for him. He'd probably be booted anyway, given that he's currently facing 26 charges. That includes 24 counts of indecent assault and 2 counts of sexual touching relating to 8 complainants. The youngest was 17 at the time of the alleged offence, so, there's that. Andrew Bolt had about 56,000 and Peter Credlin had 51,000. By the end of 2020, Sky News celebrated its highest ever audience share of 3%. In other words, of every 100 people watching a Foxtel channel at any given time, about 3 were watching Sky. And somehow that was enough to make it the platform's #1 channel. Really great stuff, you guys. Contrast this with the highest rated program at the time, 7 News. It averaged around 1.472 million viewers on that night, approximately 5.7% of the population. Now, I know that doesn't seem like much, but it is 21 times the audience of Sky News' top-rated After Dark program. Not exactly the media dominance its parent company News Corp is accustomed to, with its 59% ownership of the print media market in the country. By now, you might be thinking to yourself, if hardly anyone is actually tuning in to watch Sky News, then how is it that they're one of the most prominent and influential voices in Australian politics?
Sky News is the one that's weirdly pro-Republican American politics.
Super right-wing.
It's like, who's funding that? There's no way that there's that much of an appetite in Australia for American politics.
Dude. In 2016, Sky News became the latest addition to the Murdoch media empire when News Corp acquired it as part of its decades-long strategy of media consolidation. Over the years, News Corp bought up as many metropolitan and regional newspapers, radio assets, and eventually television stations as possible. Not to mention all of the other random bullshit he owns. We've got gambling websites, realestate.com, taste.com, Tubi, and Vogue Australia. Murdoch says this aggressive acquisition strategy is about securing his family dynasty, business survival, and a deep-seated passion for news, and that all newspapers are run to make profits. So, pray tell, why then does he famously hold on to massive, unprofitable assets? Well, because they give him political clout and influence, of course. Think of it like a subsidy. He loses a bit of money, who gives a shit? but he profits from influence. It gets him a seat at the table with the political big dogs, which he so desperately needs because he's an insecure, power-hungry little guy. But I digress. The grand plan here is to buy up as much of the media ecosystem as possible so that News Corp can repeat the same narratives and frames across multiple outlets, giving its viewpoints the appearance of independent consensus instead of what it really is, a strategically coordinated campaign to serve shared political and corporate interests. Sick. Just look at News Corp's coverage of the pandemic or pretty much any election to see the power of Murdoch's concentrated media ecosystem in action. Don't trust them! Don't trust him! Exclusive! For months, the most powerful man in Victoria stood aside as Premier after suffering horrendous injuries. Today, Michael Warner reveals the steps that took down a Premier! Now to Queensland.
We are supposed to live in the Sunshine State, not a state of fear. Yet, the youth crime scourge is now so ever-present that all Queenslanders, no matter where they live, are worried they could be next. And so today, all of Queensland's daily newspapers join forces to say, on behalf of our communities, Dear Premier, enough is enough!
Now to their coverage of the 2013 election. Finally, you now have the chance to kick this mob out. Send in the clown. Does this guy ever shut up? Tony's time. Australia needs Tony. No, we don't. Ugly ass onion with skin on eating difference between a repository and a suppository not knowing little dweeb. News Corp's newspapers have been absolutely killing it in terms of political influence for almost half a century. Sky News, on the other hand, since its acquisition in 2016, it remained a relatively niche broadcaster with a small audience of Foxtel subscribers. But in 2019, Sky News made a business decision that transformed it from a relatively unsuccessful pay TV news channel with poor viewership into a major player in Australia's online media ecosystem. It went digital.
This network, Sky News Australia, has cemented itself as one of the world's most popular political news channels online. We broke into the top 10 most watched news channels on YouTube globally, finishing in 9th position ahead of the BBC. Are there any other Australian broadcasters in that top 10 list?
No, I mean, they're not even close. And Rita, I know why you love this story because you're our number one performer there on YouTube.
One way to understand Sky's rise is through what media scholar Andrew Chadwick calls a hybrid media system. Old and new media do not simply replace one another, they work together. They have a symbiotic relationship where they coexist and they interact and they continuously evolve together. Sky News didn't abandon television for the internet, it turned the broadcast into raw material for the internet. Its studio kept producing panel shows, monologues, and commentary, but those segments could now be cut into clips and uploaded and shared and reacted to across social media. This didn't just result in a change in format, it expanded their reach to the point where they became the first Australian television news channel to reach 5 million subscribers on YouTube, with about 4.7 million viewers tuning in each month in 2024. At the time of recording, they now have 6.22 million subscribers, with almost 8 billion views total. So what was the strategy here? How did Sky adapt to the online news ecosystem? First, Sky embedded itself in platforms where audiences already consumed news. It partnered with YouTube, Microsoft News, Facebook, and Taboola, which is a public advertising technology company. By doing this, it no longer had to persuade viewers to seek out Sky. Its clips could appear inside the feeds and news flows that audiences were already using. It also learned how to package content for the systems deciding what people saw. As I'm sure anyone who uses social media is aware, content isn't distributed neutrally anymore, unlike the good old days of the, MySpace and Instagram and Facebook chronological feeds. Now what we see is dictated by recommender systems, algorithms that rank and curate and prioritize content based on engagement. This meant that Sky could clip their broadcast segments for greater visibility. Short clips, emotionally charged headlines, recognizable personalities, and jumping on trending topics that were already generating attention. Then there's the changes to the content itself. So this might be hard to imagine, but if you were a small Australian right-wing news channel freed from the geographical limitations of broadcast television, how would you go about reaching a broader audience online? Sky's answer was a time-honoured Australian tradition: cracking the American market. Take this piece from Shari Markson. Sherry? I don't care. For example.
The Wuhan Institute of Virology is the lab under investigation by international intelligence agencies examining whether an accidental leak may have started the global pandemic. Tonight, we have new information that will be of great interest to the probe announced by US President Joe Biden. We can show you footage from inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology and interviews with the very scientists at the heart of one of the greatest cover-ups the world has ever seen. It is not a conspiracy to say there were live bats at the lab. It is a fact. And as you can see, this video shows bats in a cage at the Wuhan Institute. You can also see there a researcher feeding a bat with a worm. And in this image, we can see researchers out capturing bats, and a bat even hangs off a researcher's hat.
It's of broad interest not only to Americans, but the entire world. It uses emotive language. It's essentially outrage bait by featuring emotionally charged culture war topics that travelled easily between Australian and American audiences. Sky tapped into the thriving conservative media pipeline by covering topics like COVID-19 conspiracies, gender identity, trans rights, cancel culture, free speech, immigration, and, of course, political correctness. By repackaging narratives already circulating in the US conservative media, its clips could move through ideologically aligned outlets across the entire Anglosphere. Look at how that one clip was picked up by Tucker Carlson on Fox News.
At some point, we should keep a list of all the conspiracy theories that turned out to be not just true, but precisely true. No bats were sent to Wuhan lab. We collected bat samples, sent them to the lab. We release bats where we catch them! Exclamation point! Is that true? Well, thanks to new footage from Sky News Australia, we know it's a lie.
It is not a conspiracy to say there were live bats at the lab. It is a fact.
Shari Markson is with Sky News Australia. She's the author of the upcoming book, What Really Happened in Wuhan, which we will be buying. She joins us tonight. Shari Markson, thanks so much for coming on. First to this amazing tape, where did this footage come from?
God, his face is just so... And Sky, being the dutiful little propagandists they are, reposted the interview to Facebook and YouTube.
At some point, we should keep a list of all the conspiracy theories that turned out to be not just true, but precisely true. Here's another. Peter Daszak was one of several virologists who received U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Sky also began hosting more and more politically aligned American guests on their shows, discussing familiar US culture war issues, which made Sky's content easy for international right-wing networks to recognize, reuse, and again amplify. Sky's audience also stopped being just an audience sitting there with their mouths open, receiving ideological propaganda passively. They got involved, helping to distribute, reinterpret, and reproduce the content without the need for central coordination. Researchers call this participatory propaganda. Clips are watched, reacted to, stitched, debated, reposted across YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, podcasts, forums, and reaction channels, and no, that irony is not lost on me. Politicians, influencers, commentators, independent media outlets, and extremist networks can then recycle the same material, reinforcing the frame and pushing it further into the mainstream debate. Look at how the original story from Shari spread across the internet without anyone telling the sharers what to do. Shari posts a little exclusive to Twitter. Then there are pages and pages of quote tweets. Some even have the coveted blue check mark. It eventually gets picked up by a couple of podcast stooges. These ones' names are Crystal and Sagar.
Well, Sky News Australia got their hands on some video footage from inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which directly disproves talking points that Dr. Peter Daszak and the WHO had cited around dismissing the lab leak hypothesis in the first place. Let's take a listen to what they found.
They go on to the freaking Joe Rogan podcast, the most popular podcast of all time, and disseminate Shari's story.
He said there were no live bats inside of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Sky News Australia just revealed 2017 video that bats were present inside the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
That clip then gets shared on Facebook. Right-leaning publications also pick it up. International news outlets pick it up, which also get reshared on Facebook, until it ends up somewhere you would never expect. Like this random Mariner chat forum I found, which discusses the clip on the Joe Rogan podcast. Another thing that Sky capitalizes on is its perceived authority. The sheen and a professional aesthetic of a production quality 24-hour news operation, paired with the clout of its spokespeople, work together to reinforce its legitimacy. The sheer volume and ad nauseum repetition of the network's preferred narratives by its After Dark stars then gives their claims the appearance of weight, credibility, and consensus. So put together, the system works a little like this. Sky produces authoritative-looking broadcast content. It then packages it up for distribution on social media platforms, attaches it to internationally recognizable culture war narratives, and relies on audiences and allied commentators to carry it further. It's a content pipeline that does appear sort of grassroots and organic to consumers, but in reality, it's a very carefully cultivated propaganda campaign. This strategy allowed Sky News to achieve its enormous reach at a relatively low marginal cost. It didn't need to build these new audiences, it just needed to seed content into a transnational network that does the distribution for it. But why does this specific type of political content travel so well online, and why do people just keep coming back for more?
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
To really understand what's happening here, it helps to take a step back from Sky News and look at how partisan media ecosystems function more broadly. One useful explanation comes from Harvard professor Yochai Benkler's work on network propaganda, alongside a well-established psychological phenomenon called motivated reasoning. Motivated reasoning is what happens when we assess information according to whether we want it to be true. Rather than evaluating every claim neutrally, we do tend to be more receptive to information that confirms our existing worldviews and identities. This is because information that challenges our beliefs can actually create psychological discomfort by forcing people to confront uncertainty or the possibility that they might just be wrong. Seeking out vindicating information is not just about personal preference or confirmation bias. It's a subconscious effort to reduce or avoid that psychological discomfort. The more we trust information that fits our worldview, the easier it becomes to dismiss conflicting evidence as biased, misleading, or fake. It's all fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
False fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Bogus fake news.
Eventually, relying on a narrow set of friendly sources can feel rational because everything outside the network has already been discredited. The product isn't journalism. The product is reassurance. Political actors quickly learn the same lesson. Those who parrot the network's preferred narratives receive attention and favourable coverage. The ecosystem therefore incentivizes politicians to conform to the story already being told. And those who challenge or question the narrative, well, they risk criticism, exclusion, or becoming the next target, and in some extreme, but not unheard of cases, just the targets of outright harassment. Over time, this produces what Benkler calls a propaganda feedback loop, where media organizations, political actors, and audiences continually reward one another for repeating the same narratives. Once it's established, the loop becomes really difficult to correct because challenging it carries social, political, and commercial costs. Information from outside the network struggles to circulate, no matter how well supported it is. Outlets within the network, such as Sky News, have little incentive to actually fact-check or debunk claims that support their broader narrative. This is because a correction may cost trust and attention, but repeating the claim actually generates both of those things. In Benkler's analysis of the US media system, self-identified conservatives were more likely to be embedded in a tightly interconnected partisan network anchored by the self-appointed last bastions of real news, Fox News, Breitbart, and the Drudge Report. Democrats and independents were more likely to consume a broader mix of legacy media that, for the most part, make at least an attempt to adhere to traditional journalistic norms of verification and balance. Boring! Benkler was writing about the United States, but Sky has helped connect Australia to a similar or even the same transnational network by circulating identical partisan viewpoints across a web of outlets, influencers, political actors, and audiences. The repetition itself begins to resemble evidence. Sky manufactures influence not by persuading everyone from scratch, but by keeping the loop supplied. If media ecosystems continue to be built around identity, engagement, and psychological comfort, then the risk isn't just that people encounter biased information. It's that the public debate itself actually gets organized around what feels familiar, reassuring, and emotionally consistent, not what is accurate, complex, or sometimes challenging. Over time, that can shift the Overton window, which is the range of ideas and opinions deemed politically acceptable to the mainstream population at any given time. It can make extreme positions appear like common sense and make ordinary evidence-based positions appear radical. Political debate becomes a performance of identity rather than an attempt to understand or solve anything. In Australia, you can see this in the growing prominence of culture war framing around issues like immigration, woke ideology, and national identity. Parties like One Nation rely heavily on identity-based messaging that travels easily through both broadcast and algorithmic media. In some ways, it doesn't even matter whether you agree or disagree with those positions. The point is that their political messaging is structurally well-suited to the contemporary media environment. And once you start looking at political media this way, individual stories become less important than the broader patterns. Instead of asking whether a single segment is biased, it becomes sometimes more useful to ask, does this content confirm what I already believe or does it challenge it? Is disagreement framed as illegitimate or untrustworthy? Does the content rely heavily on identity, outrage, or cultural threat? And is this narrative repeating across multiple platforms in slightly different forms? Sky doesn't need every Australian to watch Sky News. It only needs enough people, platforms, and political actors to repeat Sky News. Once media is optimized for engagement and reassurance, the challenge is not only deciding what's true, it's understanding how a version of reality was manufactured, circulated, and amplified, and made to feel unavoidable, so that we can separate the truth from the bullshit. Hey friends, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. I really appreciate you sticking around to hear me rant about something that has been bothering me for literally years. If you did happen to enjoy it, I'd love to see you back for the next one. So do the liking and sharing and the subscribing, etc., so you don't miss the next one. I'm here for context, and thank you so very much for watching. Bye!